The lockdowns have crushed many citizens' savings and their livelihoods. The right to the output of one's labour is the essence of liberty, and the protection of private property is the main reason we have government. So why did our governments destroy so many lifetimes of wealth accumulation and divide us for a virus that has treatments and a vaccine for anyone who felt vulnerable and wanted it? Should Australians who love their freedom as much as their country demand recall elections and better constitutional protection of rights?
Kate, I might get you to respond to that first of all.
Yeah, interesting question. I think when we talk about the pandemic, and I live in Melbourne, obviously, so I've been in the worst lockdown city in the world. To start with, we didn't have a choice. We just couldn't have coped with opening up and allowing people their freedoms because our hospital systems would have been overrun. We didn't have any access to vaccine. We didn't even have a vaccine at that time. And I think at that time it was for our political leaders to say, in the interests of everyone, we will be in lockdown for a period of time. Remember, the whole country was in lockdown to start the COVID environment. We are now vaccinated, and I think this is something that mentally, as a Melburnian, I'm going through at the moment. I've gone through the phase now of realisation we are not going to be a COVID zero state anymore. I've just been in Perth. That is COVID zero. It's astonishing when you've been locked down for so long to
walk around. Another world, I hear.
To work around with no mask, go to the coffee shop, go and get your hair cut. It's astonishing. But I think we've had to move mentally through this process of almost grieving for what we've lost, grieving for the fact that we won't go back to being a COVID zero state and probably not a COVID zero nation again. We cannot keep our interstate borders shut. And now I'm moving myself personally into this next phase of realisation that I'm going to have to go back out into the world, and I'm fully double vaccinated, have been for months. But I'm going to have to go out. Pardon?
Do you feel okay about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that protects me. First and foremost, I'm vaccinated. That protects me, hopefully, from getting sick from COVID. So that's the first thing. Secondly, it hopefully helps me stop spreading it to someone else. But I've got to move mentally now into that thing where I will move out into society where the chances are I may very well get COVID. And I think this is a mental transition that we have to go through as individuals and as states and cities to actually get to a point where we realise we have to live with this. I will not do another lockdown. I could not, and I'm pretty well off.
So you'll actually disobey an order if we're put into another lockdown. Is that what you're saying? Civil disobedience here, Kate Roffey?
I just couldn't. I mean, mentally, and I'm in a really great spot. I don't own a small business that's been shut for, the better part of 2 years here in Victoria. So I'm doing fairly well, and mentally I personally couldn't cope anymore. So we have to, absolutely, we've got to move on.
We're running short of time. We have a last question I want to get to. Can I just very quickly, though, go to the rest of the panellists here on that question? And we'll have plenty of time in the years to come to reflect on this. Senator Bragg, did we trade away, as per the question, too many freedoms in order to protect our society? It's unimpeachable that we have ended up in a very good position, Australia, in terms of the loss of life compared to other countries and the dreadful loss of life they've had. Was the price paid too high in terms of freedom, do you think?
That depends on what you do for a job. If you work for government or you work for a large business, then the pandemic may not have affected you all that much. If you're a travel agent or you're a barber or you own a gym, it's been a disastrous couple of years and you won't catch up quickly. And so that's why the government support packages need to be very, very cognizant of the impact on small business.
Okay. Craig?
Yeah, look, I don't think the dichotomy is between, freedom and not, as in that, if we'd had freedom, we would have had total we would have been economically fine. Unfortunately, we were dealing with a virus, and I think it's been a difficult balancing act for governments. And
do you think they've largely got it right?
To largely, I would say they have, and I think it's interesting that there were periods during this where government trust actually went up. I mean, I've been looking at government trust registers for a long time. This is actually one of the rare times it's gone up, and I wonder if that was part of the reason. Is every day they were standing up in front of you, they were telling you what was happening all the time, enormous amounts of communication. They were also telling you, they had the person who was advising them right there. They had the medical officer as well.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to compare that to the kind of normality of going, I don't know what's going on. There's something going on behind closed doors. I barely hear this. I barely watch this. I wonder if the reason we had that increase in trust in our governments is because they were right there in front of us telling us what was going on.
Hey, bit of transparency. Look at that. Just quickly, if I can, Mark Dreyfus, we have a question to go to.
We're all sick of lockdowns. Thousands of people have lost their livelihoods and have not been able to work. It's shocking, but lockdowns have saved lives. My complaint is that vaccinations didn't happen fast enough. It was a race Australians can see that Mr Morrison was wrong to not rush to get us vaccinated, because vaccination's getting us out of lockdown now.
Helen Haines?
Well, I represent a border community, so I would say that we got it wrong on some of our borders, particularly our people who live either side of
That should have been more fluid?
Absolutely. We needed more consistency in those regulations. And I would say it's only worth it if everyone comes through the other side. And I'm very concerned about some of our very vulnerable communities in rural and remote Australia, and I mean our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities who are still exposed and unvaccinated.